The lobby of Apex Innovations headquarters in downtown Austin was designed to intimidate. Soaring glass walls, minimalist sculptures that probably cost more than my annual salary, the quiet hum of expensive technology, it all screamed cutting edge success and exclusive access. My reflection stared back at me from a polished chrome pillar. Ava Sharma, early 30s, UX designer, clutching a slightly worn portfolio folder like a shield. My navy blazer was professional, my shoes sensible, but compared to the effortless chic gliding past me, I felt like a nervous applicant crashing the Met Gala. Still, I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. This interview wasn't just another step, it was potentially the step. Lead UX strategist for Apex's new AI integration division. A role that perfectly matched my niche skill set, built over years of freelance gigs, late nights teaching myself new frameworks, and navigating the often brutal tech startup world. Landing this wouldn't just be a career boost, it would be validation, proof that my unconventional path, the one my family constantly questioned, was not just viable, but valuable. Up on the 40th floor, the atmosphere shifted from intimidatingly sleek to overtly tense. The designated waiting area outside the main conference room held three other candidates, all men, all radiating the easy confidence that comes from custom tailoring, expensive watches, and probably Ivy League degrees. They exchanged brief, assessing glances when I walked in, their polite smiles not quite reaching their eyes. I offered a tentative smile back. It wasn't returned. I took the only remaining chair, positioned slightly outside the main semicircle they had formed, feeling like an afterthought. Fine. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to demonstrate competence. I clutched my portfolio, reviewing my key talking points mentally, trying to ignore the slight tremble in my hands. You earned this shot, I told myself silently. You know your stuff. The heavy glass door to the conference room clicked open, and my breath caught in my throat. Walking out wasn't the HR manager I'd corresponded with. It was Isabel, my older sister. Isabel Sharma, impeccably dressed in a navy silk blouse that probably cost more than my rent, heels clicking sharply on the polished concrete floor, holding a sleek, minimalist coffee mug like a scepter. Her dark hair was swept back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and even sharper gaze. Our eyes met across the waiting area. For a fraction of a second, surprise flickered in her expression, quickly replaced by something else. Cold annoyance? Disdain? She didn't flinch, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge my existence in any way. She simply turned, spoke briefly to an assistant hovering nearby, and then swept back into the conference room as if I were nothing more than a misplaced piece of furniture. My stomach plummeted. Isabel? Here? On the hiring panel? She worked at Apex, yes, as marketing director, a position she never failed to remind me was a strategic leadership compared to my freelance tinkering. But she hadn't mentioned anything about being involved in the hiring process for this specific role. Knowing Isabel, knowing our strained history, this wasn't a coincidence. This felt like sabotage waiting to happen. My mind raced back through years of subtle digs, backhanded compliments, and outright competitiveness. Isabel, the golden child, the one who followed the right path, prestigious university, corporate ladder, marrying a man my parents approved of. Me, the artistic one, the unpredictable one, always needing to prove myself, always falling slightly short in their comparative narrative. She had resented my small freelance successes, dismissed my passion for user-centered design as fluffy, and more than once, I suspected, subtly redirected opportunities away from me within our shared professional circles. And now she was on the panel for the biggest interview of my career. My name was called. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely heavy, smoothed down my blazer, picked up my portfolio, and walked into the lion's den. The conference room was long, dominated by a massive table. Four people sat on one side, Isabel positioned near the center, flanked by a stern-looking older man with a severe haircut, Mr. Robert Davies, head of product, according to the interview schedule, and two others I didn't recognize. Ms. Sharma, Mr. Davies began, not looking up from his notes. Please, have a seat. He gestured vaguely towards the single chair opposite them. I sat, placing my portfolio carefully on the table. The silence stretched. Isabel examined her fingernails. Mr. Davies scanned his papers. The other two panelists exchanged quiet words. No one made eye contact with me. An assistant entered carrying a tray with coffee mugs. Coffee, anyone? She asked brightly, circling the table. Mugs were distributed to Mr. Davies, to Isabel, to the other two panelists. She walked right past me, offering none, then exited the room. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. It was so deliberate, so petty. Isabel glanced up then, catching my eye, a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips before she looked down again, sipping her coffee. She knew exactly what she was doing. Mr. Davies finally looked up. So, he began, his tone bored, your resume indicates freelance UX work? And some independent projects? He made air quotes around the phrase. Yes, I replied, keeping my voice steady. For the past 6 years, I've specialized in UX research and design for tech startups and nonprofits, focusing primarily on accessibility standards and ethical AI integration. My portfolio details several key projects, including the framework redesigned for... Right, he cut me off, waving a dismissive hand towards my portfolio, which remained unopened. We have several highly qualified candidates today, Ms. Sharma. What makes you think your background is suitable for a leadership role at a company like Apex Innovations? The implication was clear. Freelance, nonprofit, not corporate enough, not pedigreed enough, not like Isabel. I took a breath. My background involves leading complex redesigns from user research through to implementation, often with limited resources and tight deadlines. I've built systems used by thousands, focusing on measurable results and user impact. For example, the predictive data system I helped scale last year for the Health Access Initiative cut processing time by 34%, directly improving. Chasing those little dream projects, Ava? Isabel interrupted, her voice syrupy sweet, using my first name with feigned familiarity that felt like another small blade twisting. She turned to the panel with a conspiratorial smile. My sister has always been drawn to niche causes. Very admirable, of course. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. Nice hobby, dear, but not serious business like ours. Mr. Davies chuckled lightly. The other panelists shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I felt the familiar wave of frustration and helplessness wash over me. How could I compete when my own sister was actively poisoning the well, framing my hard-won experience as frivolous, unimportant? I wanted to scream, to list my actual metrics, my client testimonials, the complex algorithms I'd untangled. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Isabel controlled the narrative in this room. I looked directly at her then. Not the marketing director, not the polished executive, just Isabel, my sister. The one who used to steal my diary in high school, who told my first serious boyfriend I was emotionally unstable, who always needed to be the brighter star by dimming my light. And I saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes. She was enjoying this. My resolve hardened. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I wouldn't run this time. The results are detailed in my portfolio, I said calmly, meeting her gaze. The data speaks for itself if you choose to look at it. Mr. Davies cleared his throat, perhaps sensing the unprofessional undercurrent. Well, he said briskly, glancing at the clock. We have other candidates waiting. Thank you for your time, Ms. Sharma. We'll be in touch. Dismissed, just like that. No real questions asked, no portfolio reviewed. My qualifications rendered invisible by Isabel's silent, effective sabotage. I stood up slowly, gathered my portfolio, offered a tight, polite nod, and walked towards the door, the weight of their collective dismissal pressing down on me. This wasn't just an interview rejection. It felt like another erasure, another confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy. Always secondary, always less than. But as my hand touched the cool metal of the door handle, a different thought sparked, cold and sharp. This isn't over. I didn't stop walking until the imposing glass and steel facade of Apex Innovations was several blocks behind me, the imposing architecture shrinking in the hazy Austin heat. Midtown traffic surged around me, honking horns, rumbling trucks, the general cacophony of a city that didn't pause for individual crises. My heels clicked an unsteady rhythm on the sidewalk as I moved on autopilot, seeing nothing, just replaying the scene in the conference room. Isabel's cold indifference, Mr. Davies's dismissive wave, the unopened portfolio, the suffocating weight of being erased yet again. 2 blocks away, I found refuge in a narrow, dimly lit cafe that smelled strongly of burnt espresso and stale pastries. The barista, absorbed in his phone, barely registered my presence. I ordered a black coffee I knew I wouldn't drink, just needing an excuse to occupy the small, wobbly table in the darkest corner by a grimy window. The portfolio lay heavy on my lap. Inside were years of work, successful projects, glowing client testimonials, complex UX frameworks I designed and implemented, tangible proof of my skills, my worth, proof they hadn't even glanced at. I ran my fingers over the worn edge of the folder. The red ink annotation Isabel had scrawled across my meticulously prepared resume back in the first interview attempt: wrong background, lacks strategic vision, not apex material. Burned like acid in my memory, even though I hadn't seen it directly then, only sensed its dismissive finality in their eyes. Correction. The plan had Isabel write on the resume in this part after the test, or during the second interview round. Let's adjust the flow. The first dismissal was just verbal ignoring the resume. My hand trembled as I reached for the lukewarm coffee. Why was I surprised? This wasn't new. This wasn't even the worst of it. Isabel had spent a lifetime refining the art of subtle sabotage, of positioning herself as the brilliant sun while casting me as the inadequate shadow. My mind flashed back 7 years. I was 24, bright-eyed, burning with ideas, pouring weeks of unpaid work into a pitch deck for a data integration platform tailored for small environmental nonprofits. It was innovative, user-friendly, something I truly believed in. High on caffeine and naive hope, I'd shared it with Isabel one evening, thinking, stupidly, that she, already navigating the corporate consulting world, might offer valuable feedback, maybe even sisterly support. She'd praised it vaguely, offered a few superficial suggestions, then changed the subject. A week later, the boutique consulting firm where she worked presented a nearly identical proposal: refined, polished, corporate branded, but fundamentally my framework, to a major foundation looking to fund exactly that kind of initiative. The proposal was credited solely to Ava Sharma. When I confronted her later, devastated, she'd merely shrugged over a glass of expensive Chardonnay at a family dinner. "Inspiration strikes in strange ways, Ava," she'd said coolly. "Besides, I didn't say it was mine originally. But if people connect the dots based on a professional presentation, well, that's hardly my fault, is it?" The foundation funded her version. The job I should have gotten went to a connection she referred. And my father? He raised his glass that night, beaming. "To my brilliant daughters, Isabel the visionary, and Ava," he added, turning to me with a condescending smile. "She's always been the kind one." Kind, meaning pliable, meaning harmless, meaning easily overlooked. That memory, sharp and bitter, jolted me back to the present, sitting in this sad little cafe, the ghost of that earlier betrayal overlaying the fresh sting of today's dismissal. This wasn't just about a job, it was about a pattern. A lifetime of being diminished, undermined, erased by the person who should have been my closest ally. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Julian's contact. My fiancé, my rock. The brilliant, slightly reclusive CEO of his own successful venture, Terran Dynamics Correction. Julian Vance is CEO of Apex Innovations in this version. He wasn't expecting to hear from me until after the interview. What would I even say? "It went great, except my sister sabotaged me again, and they didn't even look at my work." I started typing a message, bleak and despairing. It went exactly the way she wanted it to. Then I paused, stared at the blinking cursor, and deleted it. Number. That was her narrative winning. That was me accepting the role of the victim she always cast me in. My mother's long-forgotten words, scribbled on a note tucked into a textbook years ago, surfaced unexpectedly. Don't ever beg to be invited somewhere you built. Apex Innovations wasn't somewhere I built, not yet. But my career, my skills, my worth, that I had built painstakingly, despite their doubts, despite Isabel's underhanded tactics. And she didn't get to tear it down again. Not today. The despair began to recede, replaced by a different kind of energy. Cold, sharp, focused. Anger, yes, but controlled anger. The kind that fuels strategy, not just destruction. I deleted the weak fine I had almost sent Julian earlier. I stood up, leaving the cold coffee untouched, slipped my coat back on, and pushed my chair back from the table. I wasn't done here. Walking back into the Apex Innovations lobby felt different this time. No nervousness, just icy resolve. The security guard blinked in surprise when he saw me striding towards the elevators again. Ma'am, can I help you? I'm here for the open assessment round, I stated calmly, using the official HR term for the technical problem solving portion mentioned in the later stages of the interview process, a stage I hadn't even been invited to participate in. For the lead UX strategist position. He hesitated, checking his list. I don't see your name scheduled for this afternoon. There must be a mistake, I said smoothly, meeting his gaze. Could you please check with HR on the 40th floor? Ava Sharma. He made a reluctant call. After a moment of hushed conversation, he nodded slowly, looking slightly bewildered, and buzzed me through. The elevator ascended, the silence amplifying the determined pounding of my heart. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the atmosphere hadn't thawed. The assistant who had skipped me for coffee looked startled. The remaining candidates glanced up curiously, and from the conference room, I saw the panel emerge. Isabel, Mr. Davies, the others. They stopped short when they saw me standing there waiting. Isabel recovered first, her lips curling into a mocking smirk. Changed your mind, Ava? Decided you couldn't just walk away? You never were good at letting go, were you? I ignored her, addressing Mr. Davies directly. There seems to have been an oversight regarding the assessment phase of my interview, I said politely but firmly. I'm here to complete it. Mr. Davies looked momentarily nonplussed, glancing at Isabel, who gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. He then leaned back with a sigh of theatrical amusement, clearly deciding to indulge this perceived absurdity. Well, well, he said, his tone dripping condescension. Since you're so eager to prove yourself, Mrs. Sharma, let's see if that passion translates to actual aptitude. Why not? He clearly thought this would be a final, definitive humiliation. He signaled to the assistant, "Bring the assessment packet for Sharma." The assistant scurried away and returned with a thick packet of papers, placing it on the conference table where the panel resettled themselves, looking thoroughly entertained now. Not a laptop, not a simulation. Paper and pen. Logic puzzles, system architecture problems, ethical algorithm scenarios, Mr. Davies explained with a wave of his hand. Standard Apex assessment. 15 minutes, no questions. Begin. I heard Isabel chuckle softly under her breath. Someone behind the main panel whispered, sharp enough to carry, "Let's see if her little nonprofit AI hobby gets her anywhere now." I picked up the pen, tuned them out, and focused. The questions were complex, deliberately tricky, designed to test not just knowledge but grace under pressure. My mind locked in, analyzing, diagramming, coding solutions mentally before committing them to paper. The 15 minutes flew by in a blur of intense concentration. I ignored the tapping of Isabel's pen, the impatient sighs from Mr. Davies, the stifling weight of their collective skepticism. I finished the last question just as the timer beeped. My wrist ached, but the answers felt solid, logical, clean. I pushed the completed packet across the polished table towards Mr. Davies. He picked it up, didn't even glance at the first page, just started flipping through rapidly, his expression unchanged. Then, deliberately, slowly, he began to tear the top page in half. Right. The sound echoed in the dead quiet room. He tore the next page, and the next. Page by page, my answers, my work, my proof of competence, ripped cleanly down the middle. He let the pieces flutter into the sleek metal trash can beside his chair. He looked up at me, his eyes cold, dismissive. Impressive penmanship, he muttered. But as we said, we don't hire fiction writers here. Wrong fit. Someone behind him chuckled again, quickly stifled. I didn't react, didn't gasp, didn't cry out. I simply stood there, watching the last piece of my assessment drift into the trash. Isabel tilted her head, a look of almost clinical curiosity on her face, perhaps expecting tears, maybe shame. Her voice was soft, almost pitying. You always were stubborn, Ava. Never learned when to quit. That was when I moved. Slowly, deliberately, I walked over to the trash can beside Mr. Davies's chair and knelt down. Ignoring the stunned silence, the sudden discomfort radiating from the panel, I began picking up the torn pieces of my test paper. Carefully, methodically, not trying to piece them back together, not trying to salvage anything, just gathering the evidence of their unprofessional, malicious act. The paper felt brittle, violated. As I reached for the last torn half page near Isabel's chair, her sharp stiletto heel suddenly pinned it to the carpet. She leaned down slightly, her voice a venomous whisper meant only for me, though the tension was palpable to everyone. Still crawling for approval, little sister? Pathetic. I looked up then, directly into her cold, triumphant eyes. She expected me to flinch, to finally break. Instead, for the first time in years when facing her, I smiled. A small, quiet smile that held no warmth, only ice. Then I stood up, clutching the torn pieces of paper in my hand, and walked towards the door without looking back. Let them sit with what they had done. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of their unraveling. I walked out of the Apex Innovations Tower for the second time that day, the torn pieces of my assessment clutched in my hand like fragile, damning evidence. The Austin sun beat down, reflecting harshly off the glass buildings, but I felt cold, hollowed out. The humiliation was a physical ache this time, sharper than just being dismissed. Having my work, my careful calculations, my logical solutions literally ripped apart by a man embodying smug corporate power, while my own sister watched with cold amusement. It felt like a violation that went deeper than just a failed job interview. I didn't go back to the little cafe. I walked, aimlessly at first, block after block, letting the city noise wash over me, trying to process the calculated cruelty. They hadn't just deemed me unqualified, they had tried to break my spirit, to reinforce the narrative Isabel had crafted for years that I was stubborn, out of my depth, destined to crawl for approval I'd never receive. I found myself on a bench overlooking the river, the water glittering under the afternoon sun. I pulled out my phone. My first instinct was to call Julian, pour out the whole ugly story, seek his comfort, his outrage on my behalf. But I hesitated. What would that achieve? He couldn't undo what happened, and relying on him to fight my battles felt like conceding Isabel's point, that I couldn't stand on my own. This wasn't just about a job anymore, it was about drawing a line. It was about refusing to be erased. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed a different message, not to Julian, but to the HR contact listed on the original interview schedule. Subject: formal complaint regarding interview conduct. Lead UX strategist position. To whom it may concern, I am writing to formally document unprofessional and potentially discriminatory conduct experienced during my interview assessment today. Date for the lead UX strategist role. This includes inappropriate commentary from panel members, specifically Marketing Director Ava Sharma and Head of Product Robert Davies, and the deliberate destruction of my completed assessment test by Mr. Davies. I have retained the physical evidence and request an immediate review of this process. Sincerely, Ava Sharma. I attached scans of the torn test papers I'd already quickly uploaded to my secure cloud drive via my phone. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It probably wouldn't change anything regarding this job, but I wouldn't let their behavior go undocumented, unchallenged. Let them answer for it. Just as I pocketed my phone, feeling a small measure of control return, it rang. Julian, my heart leaped. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Ava? Hey, just finished my downtown meeting early. How did the Apex interview go? Ready for celebratory or commiserative coffee? His voice was warm, unsuspecting. Tears pricked my eyes. Hearing his normal, supportive tone after the hostility I'd just faced almost broke me. Julian, I began, my voice catching slightly. It it didn't go well. Isabel was on the panel. Silence on the other end. Then his voice, low and dangerous. She what? I told him everything then, quickly, factually. Isabel's coldness, Davies's dismissal, the test, the tearing. Isabel's final, whispered taunt. I didn't cry, just laid out the facts, the humiliation implicit in the details. When I finished, there was another long pause. Then Julian spoke, his voice devoid of its earlier warmth, replaced by an icy calm that was far more intimidating than shouting. Where are you right now, Ava? Park bench, near the Riverwalk. Stay put, don't move, don't talk to anyone from Apex if they call. I'm 5 minutes away. Click. True to his word, 5 minutes later, his familiar charcoal gray Tesla pulled up silently beside the park path. Julian Vance got out looking impeccable in a dark suit, no tie, radiating an aura of quiet, absolute authority. He walked quickly over to my bench, his eyes immediately taking in the torn papers I still held loosely in my lap, then scanning my face with sharp concern. Are you okay? He asked, his voice gentle now as he sat beside me. I nodded, managing a shaky smile. I am now. The relief of simply having him here, believing me without question, was immense. Good, he said, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly as he glanced again at the torn papers. Because we're going back. Back? Julian, number, what's the point? They made their decision. They made a decision based on unprofessional conduct and personal bias. He cut me off firmly but kindly, taking my hand. They didn't evaluate your qualifications. Apex Innovations has strict protocols against this kind of behavior. And, his eyes hardened slightly, they apparently don't know who they just messed with. He stood up, pulling me gently to my feet. Let's go. Walking back into the Apex lobby beside Julian Vance was a study in contrasts. Heads turned, but this time with deference, recognition. The security guard who had barely glanced at me earlier practically tripped over himself to buzz us through to the executive elevators. Julian strode forward confidently, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back, a subtle gesture of protection and possession. He didn't head back to the conference room. Instead, he led us directly towards the executive wing, towards the large glass-walled corner office I knew belonged to the division head who oversaw both marketing, Isabel's domain, and product development, Davies's. Julian nodded curtly to the executive assistant, who scrambled to announce his arrival. We were ushered in immediately. Isabel and Mr. Davies were already inside, along with the head of HR and one of the company's senior legal counsels. Clearly, my earlier email complaint had landed and was being discussed. Their faces registered shock, then panic, as they saw me walk in with Julian Vance. Isabel actually took a step back, her hand flying to her throat. Mr. Davies went pale. Julian didn't waste time with pleasantries. He walked calmly to the head of the table, placing his own tablet down. Good afternoon, he said, his voice deceptively mild, yet commanding the room's absolute attention. I believe we need to discuss the assessment conducted earlier today for Ms. Ava Sharma. He gestured towards me, then placed the torn pieces of my test, which I'd handed him in the elevator, carefully on the table. Perhaps Mr. Davies could explain this particular evaluation method? And Isabel, your adherence to Apex's ethical hiring protocols seems to have lapsed significantly. Mr. Davies started stammering about a misunderstanding, about the test being standard procedure. Isabel tried to interject, claiming I was unsuitable, lacked experience. Julian held up a hand, silencing them both. Unsuitable? He echoed softly. He tapped his tablet. The large screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying internal project files, code repositories, user feedback metrics. Are we talking about the same Ava Sharma who, under a consulting pseudonym due to prior conflicts with Ms. Sharma here, developed the core ethics framework for our AI compliance model last year? The one Ms. Sharma presented as her department's initiative at the London summit? Isabel gasped, her face draining of all color. Mr. Davies looked utterly bewildered. The HR head and lawyer exchanged sharp glances. Julian continued relentlessly, pulling up more files. Or perhaps the Ava Sharma, whose user centric redesign for the Health Access Initiative's data system, a pro bono project, I might add, resulted in a documented 34% efficiency increase, a framework Apex later adapted for two of our own enterprise clients. He projected an email chain, my correspondence with the nonprofit detailing the framework. Or are we discussing the Ava Sharma, whose early stage predictive algorithm, shared unfortunately in confidence with her sister 7 years ago, bore a remarkable resemblance to the innovative concept Ms. Sharma's previous consulting firm pitched shortly thereafter? He didn't raise his voice, but each revelation, backed by irrefutable digital evidence, landed like a hammer blow. He exposed not just Isabel's sabotage in the interview, but her history of undermining me, potentially even stealing my intellectual property. Isabel tried to deny it, her voice cracking. That's not true. She's twisting things. The metadata doesn't lie, Isabel, Julian stated coolly. Nor does the code commit history. Nor do the signed NDAs from her previous consultancies. He turned to the HR head and lawyer. I believe Apex Innovations has clear policies regarding professional misconduct, misrepresentation, potential IP theft, and creating a hostile interview environment. Ms. Sharma, he looked back at Isabel, his eyes like ice. You are terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. He then turned to Mr. Davies. Your lack of professional judgment and complicity in this matter will be subject to a formal review. I suggest you cooperate fully. Davies nodded mutely, looking terrified. Isabel was led out by security, looking shell-shocked. Finally, speechless. The room was silent again. Julian turned to me, his expression softening. Ava, he said formally, addressing the HR head and lawyer. Given Ms. Sharma's proven expertise, particularly her pioneering work in ethical AI frameworks, an area vital to Apex's future, and the egregious mishandling of her candidacy today, I propose we offer her the position of lead UX strategist directly, reporting to the VP of Innovation. The HR head nodded quickly. Absolutely. Consider it done. Julian looked at me, a question in his eyes. The offer stands, Ava. If you still want it, after all this. I took a breath, looking around the room, then back at Julian, my anchor. This wasn't how I expected this day to end. But maybe my mother's words were right in a different way. I didn't need to beg to be invited somewhere I had, in essence, already helped build. Yes, I said, my voice clear and strong. I accept. I paused. But I'd prefer a workspace on the development floor, closer to the engineers and researchers if possible, not the corner office. Julian smiled, understanding immediately. Consider it arranged. Later that day, after signing the contract, I stood by the window of my temporary project space, overlooking the Austin skyline. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Heard things. Didn't go well for Isabel today. Call me? I stared at it for a long moment, then simply deleted it. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. My own path lay ahead, here at Apex, doing work that mattered, work I had earned. Isabel thought she could erase me, keep me beneath her. She forgot that sometimes the quietest builders create the strongest foundations. And this time, my foundation was built on truth, competence, and the unwavering support of someone who truly saw me.